The private dining suite on the 87th floor was so silent it felt refrigerated. Frosted glass walls, a lacquered ebony table, and at its center, a single folder worth $240 million. The contract inside was meant to transfer the ownership of a 14th century maritime charter, allegedly proving priority rights over an offshore extraction corridor. A document so old, so politically sensitive, that only 3 people in the region were qualified to assess it. She was none of them. She was only the waitress refilling glasses. Or so everyone assumed. The magnate, Sheikh Marwan al-Hafez, jaw like carved basalt, voice wrapped in a clipped Gulf dialect, held the fountain pen between 2 fingers as if it were already his victory. His advisors stood behind him in a polished semicircle, rehearsed smiles, slow nods. 2 European brokers waited near the door, pretending not to sweat. And she, Layla, stood near the service station, silver tray against her hip, rehearsing her invisibility. He glanced at her brusquely, as if shooing a shadow. "Bring the document closer," he ordered without looking, "and read the title aloud." He wasn't asking because he needed her voice. He was asking because he wanted to remind everyone what she was. Layla stepped forward, fingers steady, pulse not. She lifted the parchment with the kind of care that only comes from years of reading things no one pays you to read. The ink caught the overhead light, brown oxidation, inconsistent feathering. She inhaled. And instead of reading the title, she murmured, almost too softly, the thing that froze 3 men and made 1 advisor choke. "This script? It isn't from the century they claim." The room stilled. Even the air conditioning seemed afraid of the silence. And when she turned away, placing the document back on the table with perfect composure, the magnate finally looked at her. Not with anger, but with a dawning, disquieted interest. He stared at her walking away, unable to understand how he had missed someone like her. The tension in the room rippled like heat above asphalt, thin, visible, distorting everything. The European brokers exchanged a glance so sharp it could have sliced the lacquered table. The advisors stiffened, and Sheikh Marwan, still holding the heavy gold pen, let its tip hover above the signature line without touching the page. For the first time since she entered the suite, Layla wished she could disappear again. No spotlight, no attention, no consequences. But the Sheikh's gaze followed her as she retreated to the edge of the room, clutching the empty tray against her ribs like a shield. She could feel the humiliation settling in her skin before it even arrived. "Repeat what you said," he commanded, his tone a colder version of the same clipped Gulf dialect. Short vowels, abrupt consonants, the kind used to put someone back in their place. The senior advisor smirked. The European brokers exhaled in relief. A waitress embarrassing herself was an excellent explanation. It restored the natural order. Everyone waited for her to stumble. Layla lifted her chin, just slightly, just enough to breathe. "The script isn't from the claimed period," she repeated, voice steady but small. The advisor closest to her let out a soft laugh, the kind meant to bruise. "You heard her. She thinks she can date medieval ink patterns. You may return to your station." And there it was, the familiar humiliation, the one she had rehearsed surviving. Too smart for her job, too poor for her knowledge to matter, too invisible to be taken seriously. She stepped back, but the sheikh didn't release her. "Answer properly," he insisted, narrowing his eyes at her. "Do you speak the language this document is written in?" His tone sharpened into an order. Her answer came before fear could stop it. "Yes," she said. Not just yes, she said it in flawless classical Arabic, the kind taught in the oldest manuscripts, the kind that erased centuries of dialect. The kind almost no one expected from a waitress in a borrowed uniform. The room didn't fall silent. Silence suggests softness. This was harder, denser. A stone dropped into deep water. For the first time, the Sheikh's expression wavered. Curiosity, annoyance, a flicker of respect he didn't want to show. In that tiny shift, the entire negotiation dislocated. The advisors straightened too fast. The brokers paled. A waitress who could read the document was not a waitress. They all understood the threat instantly. And for Layla, a truth surfaced with the quiet force of inevitability. Sometimes the smallest voice in the room carries the one thing no one wants to hear. She shouldn't have spoken. That was the thought hammering at the back of Layla's skull as she retreated once more to the wall, trying to shrink into the muted gold wallpaper. Her pulse thudded in her wrists, in her throat. The classical Arabic she had uttered so cleanly now tasted like a reckless confession. She kept her eyes low, but her mind spun through the same dark inventory she carried every day. The mountain of debt from her unfinished linguistics degree. The immigration lawyer who stopped answering emails 6 months ago. The nights she fell asleep, fully dressed, because she feared missing another shift. The way people looked at her uniform and assumed they knew everything. Invisibility had been her safest place. It had protected her from questions. The dangerous ones. Now she had stepped out of it. Behind her, she could hear the rustle of tailored suits as the advisors whispered among themselves. Their voices were low, but sharp enough to decode. She's trying to impress someone. She misread it. She's a liability. This is embarrassing. Move her out. She tightened her grip on the tray. Layla remembered the letter she'd never mailed, the scholarship rejection she couldn't bear to recycle. She remembered the day she took this job, promising herself it would be temporary, that she wouldn't let the world swallow her whole. But tonight the world was staring directly at her. The Sheikh tapped the pen twice against the table, the sound unnervingly precise. Enough. Begin the presentation, he ordered his team, as if flicking away the disruption she had caused. The lead broker activated the holographic display embedded in the table. A soft blue projection rose like mist. Maps, provenance charts, valuation graphs. Layla stood perfectly still. She should have been dismissed. She should have been escorted out. But the Sheikh did something she didn't expect. He gestured subtly toward her. Let her stay. The brokers hesitated. The advisors exchanged alarmed looks, but none dared oppose him. So she remained, trapped in a room where she did not belong, forced to witness a multi-million-dollar transaction built on the single document she knew wasn't right. She kept silent, but something had already shifted. Her life, which had been shrinking for years, suddenly felt like it was pressing outward against the walls, demanding space. Sometimes survival means knowing when silence is no longer safe. The presentation unfolded like an expensive illusion, precise, choreographed, and designed to overwhelm. The holographic display washed the room in pale blue light, softening the faces of the men who had already decided what the truth should be. Layla stood at the perimeter, tray against her hip, every muscle tense. She told herself to stay quiet, to breathe, to avoid eye contact. But she couldn't stop watching the document. The brokers spoke with the confidence of men who'd rehearsed selling lies for a living. This charter predates all recorded claims over the extraction corridor, the first broker announced. Its language, though archaic, aligns with regional scribal traditions of the 14th century. Layla nearly flinched. Archaic? The wording on that parchment wasn't archaic. It was synthetic, the kind produced by a modern hand imitating old norms without understanding them. The second broker pointed to the magnified script hovering mid-air. You will see the curvature of these ascenders, classic indicators of the period, and the vellum, spectacular condition. Her throat tightened. If the vellum was real, and she suspected it was, the fraud would be harder to spot. Sophisticated forgers often used authentic antique skin, then added fresh ink. It fooled everyone who didn't know how 14th century scribes breathed their letters, how they angled their strokes, how their fatigue showed after long passages. She had spent her graduate years studying that fatigue. The advisor closest to the sheikh chimed in smugly, "The document is perfect. All our experts agree." Perfect was the word that triggered her. Nothing from that century was perfect. Medieval scribes were human. They hesitated, corrected, re-angled. They left microscopic tremors in the ink that no machine could replicate. A warmth pressed against her ribs. Anxiety, yes, but also a slow-moving anger. The sheikh didn't react. He listened with the stillness of a man trained to hear lies without blinking. Yet his pen remained uncapped, motionless. Then, as the broker shifted to valuation, his gaze drifted, deliberate, searching, and landed on Layla. "Why do you keep staring at the text?" he asked, voice soft but dangerous. The question pinned her in place. Every instinct screamed, "Say nothing." But another truth rose, sharp and unstoppable. If he signed that contract, he would lose far more than money. He would inherit a fabricated claim that could collapse under legal scrutiny, trigger government intervention, and destroy his leverage in a region where reputation was currency. Her breathing shook. "I'm sorry," she murmured, lowering her head. "It's nothing." But the sheikh didn't look away. He studied her with unsettling precision, sensing the fracture point, sensing that the quiet girl with the tray knew something none of his experts dared say. In that instant, Layla understood. They weren't going to let her slip back into invisibility. And sometimes the door you fear the most is the one that opens when you try not to be seen. The holographic projection dimmed, leaving behind a faint snowfall of blue pixels. The brokers straightened their jackets, preparing to transition to the final valuation. One of them, the taller one with the overly polished smile, stepped forward with the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. "If there are no further questions," he announced, "we will move to the signing phase." Layla felt the temperature drop, not in the room, but inside her. The signing phase meant the performance was over. The illusion had succeeded. And she was the only person in the room who knew the illusion could shatter. The sheikh tapped the gold pen once, a deliberate rhythm. He wasn't impulsive. He wasn't gullible. But he was surrounded by men who needed him to believe, and that was more dangerous than ignorance. He adjusted the document slightly, turning it toward the table's spotlight. "Explain again," he said to the brokers, how the scribe authenticated the maritime lineage. The shorter broker began reciting details he clearly didn't understand. Trade routes, ink imports, references to long-forgotten registries, but halfway through, he stumbled. His eye contact broke. His voice faltered. Layla noticed. So did the sheikh. But the advisors moved to smother the anomaly with praise. "Our legal team has already reviewed the chain of custody," one insisted. Another chimed in, too quickly. All prior owners passed compliance checks. The room became a chorus of confidence designed to drown doubt. A sophisticated trap always relied on volume. Repeat something enough times, and the truth loses terrain. Layla clenched the tray harder. Her eyes traced the document again, the faint discoloration along the fold, the unnatural uniformity of the ink density, the way one stroke on the 9th line curved upward in a style that didn't even exist until 2 centuries later. It wasn't one flaw. It was a constellation of them. She swallowed. Then one of the advisors, the one with the silver cufflinks and habitual disdain in his eyes, turned toward her and smirked. "You look nervous," he said. "Relax. It's too complicated for someone in your position." The words hit her like a slap. Public, casual, intended to crush. The brokers laughed. One advisor whispered something dismissive in a Gulf dialect that could only be described as ornamental cruelty. And Layla felt something inside her tighten, then harden. Humiliation wasn't new to her, but being humiliated in front of a lie she could dismantle, that was different. That was unbearable. She lifted her gaze, not fully but enough to be noticed. The sheikh saw it. A flicker, a shift, a silent revolt. He leaned back in his chair, watching her as if she were a puzzle he had previously walked past and suddenly realized was missing pieces. The brokers resumed their pitch, but their voices felt muffled, distant. Because now, for the first time, the sheikh wasn't listening to them. He was watching her. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing in a room full of powerful men is the quiet woman who refuses to shrink again. The pen was now resting exactly where a signature should fall, its tip tracing invisible lines of destiny across a contract worth more than everything Layla had ever touched in her life. The brokers stood poised, their breath shallow, their suits stretching taut across their shoulders. They sensed proximity to triumph, the kind of triumph that paid commissions large enough to rewrite entire futures. Layla sensed something else entirely. The room felt staged, too polished, too rehearsed. The lighting was set to flatter, the advisors positioned like guardians of an inevitable outcome. Every movement, every word, every nod had been choreographed around a single goal: get the sheikh to sign. Her stomach tightened. The lead broker, emboldened by the sheikh's silence, moved closer and placed a velvet-lined box beside the document. "The seal," he announced, lifting the lid with a theatrical flourish. Inside lay a medieval signet ring, heavy, ornate, and far too pristine. Layla's eyes locked onto it. Another anomaly. Medieval rings used for sealing had micro-fractures from repeated heating and cooling cycles. This one had none. Its edges were sharp, its impressions too perfect, as if it had been made weeks ago, not centuries. The broker continued. "This was found alongside the charter itself, a remarkable discovery that confirms its authenticity." The advisors murmured approval. The sheikh said nothing, but Layla caught the faintest twitch in his jaw, the subtle sign of a man hearing something he didn't trust. Still, the performance continued. The second broker tapped the hologram. A set of glowing signatures from past owners appeared. You will note the uninterrupted lineage, 6 transfers over 6 centuries, everyone validated by provenance experts. 6 centuries, 6 signatures, 6 identical stylistic flourishes. Layla felt her pulse spike. No medieval scribe, or any scribe, kept identical flourishes for that long. Flourishes evolved with age, injury, fashion, political influence. But here they were, carbon copies. Her breathing sharpened. This wasn't a mistake. This was a system. One advisor leaned toward the sheikh. "Sir, with all due respect, we are delaying over nothing. Sign so we can secure the corridor before the rival syndicates move." Another piled on. "Your competitors won't hesitate." Pressure. Classic. Close the gap between doubt and decision before the questioning mind awakens. Layla could see the moment tightening around the sheikh like a trap. He shifted in his chair, no longer relaxed, no longer fully controlled. He was aware of something, someone, casting a shadow over the certainty presented to him. His gaze drifted again, straight to her. She froze. In that glance lay a silent question. Not a command, not an accusation, a question. But before he could speak, the silver cuff-linked advisor stepped forward and dismissed her entirely with a wave. "Please ignore her, sir. She's just the help." Just the help. The words crackled through her, igniting a quiet fury she didn't know she still possessed. And sometimes, the smallest dismissal is what finally forces a truth to break the surface. The air in the suite thickened, as if the walls themselves anticipated collapse. The brokers sensed victory slipping, the advisors sensed the sheik's hesitation, and Layla, still holding an empty tray, felt the room tilting toward a point of no return. The silver cuff-linked advisor stepped closer to the sheik, lowering his voice into a persuasive murmur. "Sir, we cannot allow a service worker to derail a $250 million acquisition. The corridor rights will be lost if we delay even an hour." Layla stared at the document, at the ink that tried too hard to be ancient, at the vellum that was older than the words written on it, at the signatures that pretended history didn't leave fingerprints. She swallowed, willing herself to stay quiet. She had already crossed too many lines tonight. Invisible people didn't get second chances, but the sheik wasn't focused on his advisor. His eyes were back on her, sharp, precise, evaluating. Then he said the words that froze the entire room. "What did you see on the document?" The advisor stiffened. The broker's smiles collapsed. Layla's heart thudded once, violently. "I didn't ask them," the sheik continued, voice cutting through the suite like a scalpel. "I asked her." Layla felt heat rise to her throat. She was caught between terror and responsibility, between silence and truth. "I shouldn't," she whispered. "You can." His tone softened only slightly, but enough to signal that he was no longer dismissing her. She took one small step forward. The tray trembled in her hands. But before she could speak, the taller broker lunged verbally, desperation leaking through his polish. "Sir, with respect, she misread what she saw. These strokes are absolutely period correct. Your analysts signed off too quickly," the sheik interrupted, not raising his voice, but erasing theirs. The entire room recalibrated. Layla felt the shift like a physical force. Suddenly, every pair of eyes was on her, waiting, needing, fearing. She wanted to vanish. She wanted to cry. She wanted to run. Instead, she breathed in, feeling every bruise life had carved into her transform into something steady. The sheik lifted the document and angled it toward the spotlight again. "Come closer," he said. Layla stepped forward, legs trembling beneath her uniform. The brokers stared at her with practiced contempt. The advisors with rising panic. She reached the table and saw, up close, the details that had been haunting her since the moment she touched the parchment. The ink, the curvature, the unnatural cohesion. Her voice almost failed, but the truth didn't. "There is something wrong," she said quietly. The brokers stiffened. The air locked in place, and the sheik nodded, as if he had been waiting for that single confirmation. Sometimes, a single step forward is enough to rewrite the entire fate of a room. Layla leaned over the parchment, the world narrowing to a tight circle of spotlight and breath. Every sound in the room dimmed, advisors shifting, brokers swallowing panic, the sheik's steady breathing, all fading behind the forensic clarity rising in her mind. Up close, the deception was unmistakable, but she had to choose her first step carefully. Too much truth at once would make them dismiss her. Too little would keep the sheik blind. She lifted one trembling hand and pointed, very slowly, at the 9th line of the charter. "Here," she whispered. The sheik lowered his gaze. The brokers didn't move. Her fingertip hovered a fraction above the ink. "Do you see this upward curve at the end of the stroke?" The taller broker pounced, a stylistic flourish of the period. "No." Her voice surprised even her. It didn't tremble, it cut. Silence fell like a dropped blade. She steadied her breathing and spoke again, calm and precise. Scribes of that century didn't curve their terminal strokes upward. Not like this. The technique didn't appear until 200 years later, when steel nibs became common. The shorter broker's jaw twitched. That is a trivial detail. No, she said. It's the first crack. It means the person who wrote this wasn't just imitating the script. They were guessing. The sheik's eyes sharpened. She continued, her voice gaining a quiet authority as she had never used in public. Medieval scribes wrote with reed pens. Their strokes ended with a soft taper, never a rising hook. A hook means pressure. Pressure means metal. Metal means modern. A beat of stunned quiet. Then she added the part that mattered, the part men like these understood. And if even one stroke is modern, the entire document becomes inadmissible in court. That landed. Hard. The silver cuff-linked advisor inhaled sharply. The brokers went completely still. Someone at the back whispered a curse in a clipped Gulf dialect. But the sheikh, he leaned closer, studying the line with new eyes, as if her words had shifted the wavelength of the room. "You're certain?" he asked. She hesitated only 1 second, long enough to feel every consequence of what certainty would cost her. "Yes," she said. He didn't push the pen aside. He didn't order them out. He simply sat back, expression unreadable, and said, "Show me another." Her pulse thudded, but not from fear anymore. This was the moment the mountain began to tilt. And the truth, once released, rarely rolls back uphill. The brokers regrouped in a panic masked as professionalism. They straightened their cuffs, exchanged frantic micro-glances, and flooded the room with rapid explanations, hoping to bury Layla's revelation under sheer volume. "Sir, you're being misled. The stroke variation is within acceptable historical deviation. Our experts can provide supplementary verification. Pressure, speed, noise, all engineered to herd the sheikh back toward the signature line." The silver cuff-linked advisor leaned in, placing the contract squarely under the spotlight again, his tone firm, fatherly, dangerous. "Sir, we're wasting precious time. Rival syndicates are already circling. If we don't sign tonight, right now, we risk everything." He placed the gold pen into the sheikh's hand, and for a moment, just one, the sheikh allowed it. The pen lowered. The parchment waited. The room held its breath. Layla felt the world tilt. This was the moment, the threshold, the second before an irreversible fall. Her heart pounded so violently, she thought the sound would echo off the glass walls. The brokers leaned forward. The advisors braced. The pen descended another millimeter. Layla's throat tightened, a knot of fear and responsibility, of helplessness and clarity. No one else would stop him. No one else even wanted to. Her fingers went numb around the tray. And then, no. She didn't plan to say it. The word erupted out of her, clean and sharp as a blade swung in desperation. The pen froze. Every head snapped toward her. The taller broker spat, "Stay in your place." But Layla stepped forward, dropping the tray onto the sideboard with a metallic crack that sliced through the room. "I can't let him sign." The words came out steady, too steady. The advisor nearest her hissed, "You are a waitress. I am the only one in this room who has actually read the document." That stunned them. Her voice carried none of the meekness they expected. It carried certainty, integrity, and a terrifying lack of fear. She approached the table, slowly, deliberately, her palms damp but her spine straight. "There is another anomaly," she said, "a worse one." The broker's masks cracked. The short one whispered something frantic under his breath. The tall one moved as if to block her, but the sheikh raised a hand, quiet, sovereign, absolute. He stared at her, not as a servant, not as a disruption, as the only person in the room telling the truth. "Show me," he said. Layla exhaled, and pointed to the signature lineage, the 6 names spanning 6 centuries, each with identical stylistic curls. "This," she whispered, "is impossible." The room shivered, and in that moment, she understood something deeper than fear. Courage sometimes doesn't roar. Sometimes it interrupts a pen hovering over a lie. Layla stood at the head of the table now. No tray, no practiced invisibility, nothing shielding her from the weight of 20 furious eyes. Her pulse thrummed through her fingertips, but her voice, when she finally spoke, carried a forensic calm that cut through the panic thickening the room. She pointed to the signature lineage projected above the parchment. 6 names, 6 centuries, 6 identical stylistic flourishes. "This pattern alone," she said quietly, "is enough to collapse the document in any court." The tall broker lunged toward the hologram controls. "There is nothing unusual here." But the sheikh raised a hand, freezing him mid-step. "Let her speak." Layla nodded once, then continued. "In real historical documents, handwriting evolves the way people do. Age affects stroke pressure. Injury affects curvature. Politics changes spelling conventions. Even the ink's flow shifts as tools wear down." She traced the first signature with her fingertip, hovering, respectful, never touching the parchment. "But these," she shifted to the next. "They're identical, not similar, identical." She tapped a control and magnified the flourish. The curl at the end of each signature glowed on the display. 6 loops, 6 centuries apart, all perfect matches. "No human hand can replicate its own gesture perfectly," she explained. "Not in the same year. Definitely not across generations." The shorter broker's voice cracked. "It's a stylistic tradition." She shook her head. "No, the pressure points are identical. The micro waver at the base of the loop? Identical. The ink dispersion? Identical. That means these were produced from a single model. A single model. One reference, one forger." The sheikh's expression hardened, so slowly it was terrifying. Layla went on, her confidence rising with each detail. "There's also the vellum." She pointed to the faint, unnatural discoloration near the fold. "It's genuine, yes, but the ink sits on top of the parchment fibers, not within them. Old ink sinks into the grain. It fades inward. This ink clings to the ridges." She paused, then delivered the part that mattered most. "That only happens when new ink is placed on old skin." A ripple of dread traveled through the advisors. The silver cuff-linked one snapped. "You are overstepping." "Quiet," the sheikh said, without looking at him. Layla's voice softened as she revealed the final blow. "And here," she pointed to the top margin where a faint indentation ran horizontally. "There are pressure marks from a modern cutting tool. Uneven, mechanical, not from a medieval knife." The taller broker went pale. She added, "If you follow the line, it aligns with modern trimming machines used by restoration shops, which means the document was manipulated recently. Very recently." Silence cracked across the room. Every flaw she exposed wasn't just an error. It was evidence of intention, deliberate fabrication, premeditated fraud. Layla stepped back, breathing softly, waiting. The sheikh closed the pen, slowly, deliberately. He didn't look at the brokers. He didn't look at his advisors. He looked only at her. This was no longer about a document. It was about trust. He asked one question, quiet, lethal. "How deep does the deception go?" Layla swallowed, but before she could answer, she felt an old truth rising inside her. Power collapses fastest when built on silence, and she was done being silent. Layla steadied herself, palms lightly pressed to the edge of the table. Her voice, when it came, was soft, but it carried the authority of someone who had spent her life reading what others skimmed, deciphering what others ignored. "There's one more flaw," she said. "The worst one." The brokers froze. The advisors braced. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. She pointed, not to the signatures, not to the ink anomalies, but to the bottom corner of the charter. A cluster of dense, almost decorative text most people would never bother to read. "Here," she whispered. The sheikh leaned closer, his brow furrowing. "That block of writing looks ornamental," she continued. "But it isn't. It's a clause." A murmur rippled through the advisors. Clauses on medieval charters were rare and dangerous. Layla magnified the text with the table's controls, revealing the tiny strokes, too symmetrical, too modern, too precise to be hand-drawn under candlelight. "This is a liability clause," she explained, tapping the first line, "a modern one." The taller broker stepped forward, sweating. "That is a misinterpretation." "No." Her voice sliced through his protest. "It's a legal device, and it doesn't belong anywhere near a document from the 14th century. The sheikh's expression darkened. Layla inhaled and translated the clause into simple terms for him. "It states that if the charter is ever challenged, you, not the seller, bear full responsibility for proving its authenticity." The silver cuff-linked advisor sputtered. "That's standard. In medieval documents," she countered, turning sharply. "No. This clause didn't exist until the late 19th century, and even then, it wasn't formatted like this." She tapped the projection again. "And here's the real trap. If its authenticity fails, you lose not just the corridor rights, but the deposits, the restoration fees, and your claim to any previous disputes tied to the corridor." A dead, suffocating silence swallowed the room. Layla continued, each word measured, precise. "This clause reverses the burden of proof, meaning," she looked directly at the sheikh, "you would lose even if you won." The room jolted with shock. The shorter broker tried one final push. "Sir, she's exaggerating." Layla raised her hand and overrode him, her voice now unshakably steady. "The person who wrote this wasn't forging history. They were building a legal coffin." The sheikh's chair shifted back an inch, slowly, heavily, as the magnitude settled over him. He understood now. The forged charter wasn't the crime. The clause was. If he had signed, it would have detonated his empire from the inside, legally, quietly, irrevocably. Layla stepped away from the table, heart pounding, fear roaring in her chest. But she didn't take a single word back. Because truth, once spoken, cannot be reburied. And sometimes the deadliest weapon in the room is the sentence no one else dared to read. The room fractured. Not physically, no one moved enough for that. But the silence, the posture, the confidence that once filled the suite collapsed like a structure with its beams pulled out. The taller broker was the first to break. His voice, sharp and frantic, sliced through the stillness. "Sir, she is misrepresenting the clause. Our legal team vetted every word." But the sheikh didn't look at him. He didn't look at anyone except the parchment beneath the spotlight, the object that had nearly stolen $250 million from him in the quietest, cleanest, most elegant fraud he had ever seen. The silver cuff-linked advisor stepped forward, palms raised as if offering calm. "Sir, with due respect, this girl is not qualified." "Enough," the sheikh said. Not loud, not angry, deadly. The advisor staggered back as if shoved. The shorter broker tried next, voice trembling now. "This clause is decorative, copyist embellishment. It carries no legal weight." Layla stepped forward before the sheikh could respond. Her heart felt like it was trying to climb out of her chest, but her voice held. "This clause is enforceable. It's phrased in a way that only modern lawyers use. Even the punctuation marks are wrong for the claimed period. She pointed to a tiny detail near the end of the clause. There, see that double mark? Medieval scribes didn't use that form of emphasis. That only appears after the introduction of industrial printing influences. The Sheikh's eyes sharpened, finally leaving the document to rest on the brokers. You attempted to trap me in a contract that would strip me of rights you claim to grant. The tall broker's composure cracked. No, sir, The Sheikh leaned forward, voice cold as winter stone. You crafted a forgery so you could sell me land disputes you knew I could never claim. One of the advisors whispered something horrified in a Gulf dialect. A phrase used only when reputations were about to be buried. The brokers started talking at once. We can renegotiate. It was a misunderstanding. We were following expert advice. Their words tumbled over each other, useless, panicked, desperate. And still the Sheikh did not raise his voice. Who wrote it? He asked. The tall broker froze. The shorter one's jaw clenched. The advisor who'd mocked Layla earlier took one step toward the door, barely noticeable. But the Sheikh caught it. No one leaves. His tone turned the air metallic. Layla watched the scene, a knot tightening at the base of her throat. She had wanted to expose the truth, yes, but she had not expected to be standing in the center of a corporate implosion. The brokers' faces lost their rehearsed serenity. Their eyes darted between the door, the document, the Sheikh. A lie this engineered didn't begin with two brokers. It required architects, financiers, experts willing to counterfeit the past, and it was all coming undone. The Sheikh closed the folder slowly, then placed the pen atop it with deliberate finality. A gesture that felt like a verdict. Everything you have shown me tonight, he said, is compromised. Layla felt the tremor beneath the surface now. The kind that comes right before a building that seemed unshakable finally begins to fall. And sometimes collapse begins not with a shout, but a whisper of truth spoken by the one person nobody saw coming. For the first time all night, the brokers looked small. Not physically. Both men still stood in their tailored suits, still wore watches that cost more than her rent for a year, still held the posture of men used to dominating every room they entered. But something had drained from them. A certainty, a cruelty, a kind of practiced superiority that evaporates the moment the floor shifts beneath your feet. The Sheikh folded his hands, elbows resting lightly on the table. Tell me, he said, how long have you been preparing this? His voice was quiet, too quiet. The shorter broker swallowed, hard. Months, he whispered. The taller one shot him a look of pure betrayal. Don't answer. But the Sheikh cut in again, voice smooth as oil. Do you think silence will protect you now? The silver cuff-linked advisor tried to reassert control. Sir, perhaps this is not the moment. The Sheikh turned his head, slowly, deliberately, and stared at the man. One look, nothing more. But it made the advisor shrink in a way Layla had never seen. It was the look of a man who had just realized he stood too close to a falling structure. The Sheikh leaned back in his chair, the leather groaning under the shift of power. His attention drifted to Layla again, steady, probing, acknowledging. You saw through this, he said. Not a question, a recognition. Before any of my experts. Her stomach tightened. She didn't know how to hold this kind of attention. Attention that wasn't dismissive, wasn't cruel, wasn't belittling. It was something else. Sharper, respect wrapped in curiosity. I just read what was in front of me, she said softly. The tall broker snapped. You read a line, that's all. This entire room is being manipulated by what? the sheikh interrupted. "A woman who earns her living serving your drinks, yet sees what your specialists could not?" The words weren't cruel, they were surgical. Layla felt heat crawl up her throat. Not humiliation this time, but something more complex. The shock of being defended by someone who could erase her life with a phone call. The tall broker's voice rose with panic. "She's lying. She wants something. This is all theatrics." Layla flinched, but before she could respond, the sheikh lifted a hand. "Enough." The silence that followed was absolute. Then slowly he rose from his chair. The room reacted like a living thing. The advisors straightened, the brokers stiffened, even the security guard by the door subtly shifted his weight. The sheikh walked around the table until he stood across from Layla. Not towering, not threatening, but present, fully, unmistakably present, in a way that made the room shrink to the two of them. "Tell me," he said quietly, "what else did you notice?" This was the moment she had feared. The moment she was certain she would break. The moment when every insecurity, debt, immigration limbo, unfinished degree, swarmed her like locusts. But she inhaled and answered. "There are rhythmic inconsistencies in the script. The spacing matches digital alignment, not hand spacing." The sheikh's eyes narrowed. "Meaning?" "Meaning the forger copied a template, not a manuscript." Behind them, the shorter broker sank into a chair, face draining of color. The taller one swore under his breath, a single sharp word in a dialect Layla recognized as pure panic. The sheikh turned back to them, his voice like stone rolling downhill. "This negotiation is over." The shockwave that followed didn't need volume. Power had changed hands so completely that no one dared breathe too loudly. And sometimes the true imbalance isn't created by wealth or titles. It's revealed the moment truth chooses a new center of gravity. The suite felt suddenly too small for the magnitude of what had just unraveled. The brokers, once smug, polished, unshakable, now looked like two men who had stepped into the wrong room on the wrong night with the wrong woman watching. One of the advisors whispered into another's ear, panic-laced words in a Gulf dialect used only in emergencies. Another advisor quietly closed his tablet, as if shutting it might shield him from liability. No one looked at Layla, not directly. But they all feared her now. The truth she had spoken had weight, heavy enough to crush careers, reputations, and carefully constructed facades. The sheikh stood at the head of the table, posture regal, composed, lethal. "Who authorized the appraisal?" he asked. Both brokers spoke at once. "It was handled externally. We hired specialists. The archive we used was reputable." Their voices overlapped, contradicting each other, growing sharper, more frantic. "Enough," the sheikh said again, though this time the word carried the finality of a verdict. He motioned to his chief advisor. "Retrieve the full chain of custody documentation." The advisor fumbled with his tablet, hands shaking. Within seconds, a glowing hologram projected above the table. Signatures, transfers, certifications. Layla scanned it, her eyes trained to pick out linguistic oddities the way others spotted colors. "There," she said softly. The room froze. She pointed to a certification dated 20 years earlier. An official stamp, ornate and convincing. The phrasing on this validation is wrong. This department didn't use this format until 7 years later. The tall broker staggered. "You can't possibly know that." Layla's gaze didn't waver. "I wrote my unfinished graduate thesis on the evolution of government nomenclature in archival stamps." The shorter broker whispered something broken. A confession, not loud enough to decipher. The sheikh exhaled once, slowly, deeply, as understanding crystallized. "You forged the certification as well," he said. The taller broker's face twisted. "We outsourced it." "To whom?" the sheikh asked. Silence. Then Layla noticed something else. Something faint, but fatal. She stepped closer to the hologram and zoomed in on the certifying officer's signature. "The name doesn't exist," the shorter broker's head snapped up. "What?" "The registry this signature claims to reference didn't exist until years later. The officer's title is anachronistic. This person never held this position. They never existed at all." A sound escaped one of the advisors, half groan, half prayer. The sheikh turned toward the brokers with a stillness so absolute it felt like a gravitational field. "How deep does this fraud go?" The tall broker opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His throat worked, but the words refused to form, caught between fear and inevitability. Layla watched him crumble, a man unraveling under the weight of a truth he could never outrun. And the sheikh watched her, a silent acknowledgement that she had just dismantled a multi-million-dollar deception with nothing but her eyes, her mind, and a courage she never meant to reveal. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who has nothing left to lose. The suite's atmosphere shifted from tension to something darker, an unraveling, a reckoning. The brokers no longer fought with polished arguments or confident denials. They fought with silence, with trembling hands, with the quiet dread of men realizing the walls were closing in. The sheikh walked slowly around the table, one hand brushing the back of each chair as he passed, an old habit of his, a way of taking the measure of a room, of reclaiming it. "Show me the name of the specialist who authenticated the vellum," he said. The silver cuff-linked advisor's voice shook. "Sir, that external expert is no longer reachable." "Meaning?" the sheikh pressed. The shorter broker answered this time, his voice paper-thin. "Meaning, he was a consultant, temporary, contract-based, a ghost," Layla said softly. All eyes snapped to her. She stepped toward the table again, drawn by a force she barely understood, something between duty and inevitability. "If the expert cannot be located," she continued, "then his certification is meaningless. It cannot hold legal weight, it cannot support provenance, and it cannot defend the document against scrutiny." The tall broker wiped a shaking hand across his mouth. "You don't understand how these transactions work." "No," Layla said evenly. "I understand how history works." That silenced him more effectively than the sheikh ever could. She zoomed the hologram onto the chain of custody stamp once more. "There's a second flaw," she said. "Here, notice this diacritic pattern. It's uniform, too uniform." The sheikh leaned in. "What does that indicate?" "A digital overlay," she answered. "Not a hand-applied stamp. Someone copied the same mark repeatedly across multiple documents. Perfect spacing, perfect angle. Machines make that mistake. Humans don't." The room exhaled a collective shudder. The silver cuff-linked advisor tried again, desperation leaking through cracks in his authoritative tone. "Sir, even if portions were reconstructed, the core of the document—" Layla cut him off gently but decisively. "There is no core. Every component that gives this charter legal weight has been tampered with." The sheikh turned to the brokers, his voice dangerously calm. "You intended to sell me a fabricated claim, bury a liability clause inside it, and leave me responsible for defending an impossible document." The tall broker protested weakly. "We were pressured. Funders, timelines." But the sheikh didn't look at him anymore. His eyes were on Layla. "You saw all of this in minutes," he said. She lowered her gaze. "I wasn't trying to interfere. I just recognized the patterns." "And if you had not spoken," he asked softly, "what would have happened to me?" She swallowed hard. "You would have signed a contract that would destroy you from the inside. Everyone in the suite felt the truth of that settle like dust after an explosion. The broker nearest her finally broke. "It wasn't supposed to be her," he muttered. "We calculated every variable, every reaction, every vulnerability. We planned for everything." He looked up, eyes wild, enraged. "Except her." Layla stepped back instinctively. But the sheikh didn't move. He didn't shout. He didn't even blink. He simply said, "The deception ends now." And for the first time all night, Layla realized the room no longer revolved around the brokers or the document. It revolved around the quiet woman who saw what no one else dared to see. Sometimes, the collapse of a lie is just the world remembering who was invisible long enough to witness everything. Security entered the suite without a word, silent, discreet, already briefed through signals the sheikh had given long before anyone else noticed. They did not touch the brokers. They didn't need to. The knowledge of what was coming was restraint enough. The tall broker sagged into his chair, staring at the table as if the walnut surface might open and swallow him whole. The shorter broker pressed his palms together, whispering fractured explanations no one was listening to. The sheikh remained standing, one hand resting lightly against the back of his chair. The posture of a man reclaiming a kingdom someone tried to hollow out beneath him. He nodded once at security. "Collect their devices." The order was soft, but it hit the room like a breaking spine. The brokers flinched. The advisors looked away. Layla stood completely still, heart hammering too loudly in her ears. Security retrieved every phone, tablet, encrypted key. Each collected item was placed on the marble credenza like evidence in a quiet tribunal. The sheikh didn't look at the devices. He looked at the men. "You attempted to sell me a document with forged lineage," he said, voice measured, almost academic. "You embedded a clause designed to isolate liability." He stepped closer to them. "And you counted on my advisors," his eyes flicked to the trembling men behind him, "to pressure me into signing before questions could surface." The silver cuff-linked advisor stiffened. "Sir, You," the sheikh said without turning, "will stay silent." The advisor obeyed instantly. Layla felt a strange chill move through her. Not fear, but realization. This was not just exposure. This was judgment. The sheikh stepped aside, allowing Layla a clear view of the brokers. He wasn't hiding their downfall from her. He was letting her witness it. "Do you know," the sheikh asked them quietly, "what saved me tonight?" The tall broker whispered, "Your legal team. Your market instincts." "No." He turned toward Layla. She did. The words hit her like a physical impact. Light, heavy, impossible. The shorter broker's voice cracked. You can't trust her over us." "I trust the one who saw what you tried to bury," the sheikh said. "I trust the one who had nothing to gain by speaking." The tall broker tried one last time. "We can negotiate and reduce the price. Salvage the deal." "There is no deal," the sheikh said. Security moved closer. "But," the sheikh added, "there will be consequences." The brokers' faces twisted with dread. Layla swallowed hard. This part, the retribution, the fallout, felt like stepping into a world she had only ever read about in footnotes and newspaper articles. She was not made for these rooms, these stakes. She was just the woman who had seen the ink too clearly. The sheikh turned back to her, his voice lowering in a way that felt almost human. "You prevented a collapse that would have reached far beyond me. You prevented a legal disaster, a political trap, and financial ruin." Layla opened her mouth to answer, but no sound came. He continued, softer still. "And you did it while being treated as if you weren't even in the room." Her eyes burned suddenly. She looked away, afraid of the heat rising behind her ribs. The sheikh lifted the forged charter between two fingers as if holding a poisoned relic. "This document," he said evenly, "is going to be analyzed by my own forensic division." He paused. "And you will be part of that review." The words hit her like a door opening into blinding light. She blinked. I'm not qualified." "You are more qualified than the men who attempted to deceive me." Her breath caught, in her chest, in her throat, in all the hollow places she had learned to keep quiet. The sheikh turned to security. "Remove them." As the brokers were escorted out, one of them looked back at her, not with hatred, but with disbelief. As if his entire scheme had been undone, not by an institution, not by a task force, but by a waitress with eyes trained to see the smallest, oldest truths. Sometimes accountability is not the fall itself, but the moment the room finally understands who never belonged on the ground. After security led the brokers out, the suite remained unnervingly quiet. Not peaceful, no. The silence felt aware, as if the room itself had witnessed too much and was now waiting for its final entry in the record. The advisors stood frozen in a tight line, each of them rehearsing ways to distance themselves from the disaster. Some dabbed sweat from their temples, others stared at the floor, unable to meet their employer's gaze. Layla stayed near the end of the table, small, shaken, unsure where to place her hands. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night was leaking out of her, leaving behind trembling muscles and a sense of floating disbelief. She had done it, but she didn't feel victorious. She felt exposed. The sheikh walked toward the service station, toward her. Not threatening, not looming, just present, in a way that made her breath catch. "You spoke when no one else dared," he said. She looked down. "I only spoke because I was afraid you would sign something dangerous." "And every expert in this room," he said, glancing at the advisors, "was content to let me do exactly that." A few advisors winced. None defended themselves. The sheikh returned his attention to her. "What is your background?" She hesitated. "My degree was in historical linguistics." "I didn't finish." "Why?" Her throat tightened. "Debt. And immigration complications." He nodded slowly, as if absorbing not just the facts, but the weight behind them. "And since then?" "I've been working here," she said, gesturing weakly to the tray. "Mostly nights." The sheikh's gaze traced the forgotten tray, the borrowed uniform, the exhaustion in her posture. "You do not belong in a room like this as staff," he said quietly. "You belong here as an analyst." She swallowed, hard. "That's impossible." He tilted his head. "Is it? You dismantled a $240 million fraud in under an hour." "That was an accident," she whispered. "No," he said. "That was mastery." The word hit her so sharply she actually flinched. He walked back to the table, picked up the forged charter, and set it gently inside its folder as if closing a chapter. "My Forensic Acquisitions Institute is opening a new division," he said, "focused on document authentication, linguistic anomalies, and provenance risk." She stared at him, unable to breathe. "I would like you to join it," he continued. "Not as support staff, not as an assistant." He held her gaze. "As a lead analyst." Layla felt the room tilt beneath her feet. Her knees threatened to buckle. She gripped the edge of a chair to steady herself. I've never led anything," she whispered. "Then learn." His tone softened. "You already see what others miss. That cannot be taught." The advisors stiffened behind him, some in surprise, some in jealousy, some in quiet resentment. But no one dared object. The sheikh took a final look at her, a look without arrogance, without pity, without distance. "You saved me from a ruin engineered with precision," he said. Let me give you a chance to save yourself." Her eyes burned again. She blinked fast, trying to hold the tears back. "You're offering me a real position." "I am offering you," he said, "a place where your mind will no longer be invisible." A tremor ran through her. Fear, relief, disbelief, all tangled into one impossible feeling. "Think before answering," he added. "A new life requires courage." Layla exhaled slowly, the room blurring at the edges. Sometimes opportunity arrives disguised as catastrophe. And sometimes it finally knocks when you're too exhausted to keep hiding from your own worth. 1 year later, Layla stood in a quiet corner office overlooking the city. Her city now. Its skyline washed in early gold. The walls behind her weren't decorated with wealth. They were lined with manuscripts, vellum samples, ink kits, magnification tools. The instruments of a life she once believed she had lost forever. She placed the final report into its folder, a 13th century marriage compact, authenticated under her division's new protocols. Her division. Even now, the phrase felt unreal. The Institute had grown around her, carefully, respectfully, without spectacle. Researchers asked for her opinion. Archivists trusted her eye. And sometimes, when she corrected an entire team with a quiet observation, she caught a glimpse of something she had never seen in her reflection before. Steadiness. No tray, no borrowed uniform, no invisible corners, just her. She still walked everywhere lightly, as if afraid to disturb something delicate. But the fear that once lived in her chest had been replaced by something sturdier. Dignity, maybe. Or simply the sense of belonging she had spent years pretending she didn't need. Once a month, the sheikh visited the division. He never stayed long. He didn't need to. His presence was a reminder, not of power, but of the night someone unheard became unavoidable. As she locked the archive room for the evening, she paused in the doorway, letting her fingertips brush the cool metal of the key. Some truths break a room. Others build a life. If this story stayed with you, subscribe, share it, pass it on. Someone else might be standing on the edge of their own unseen beginning.